things. Today I am here again with Darren. He's a mountain man. Normally I would take care of that, but he is sweaty because it's like 90 degrees and I'm not going to do that.
97.
That's hot. Anyway, so today we're going to talk about lust in the Bible. So again, Darren has, what are your credentials? He was a missionary. He
Lutheran missionary, studied theology, comparative religions, all that as part of college. So, yeah.
Parties all over the place. Okay, so I'm looking at a website, learnreligious.com, and there's a few verses about sexual immorality. And so Darren's going to talk about them, but I'm going to read a few for you. So Matthew 5:28. But I tell you that if you look at another woman and want her, you are already unfaithful in your thoughts. 1 Corinthians 6:18. Flee from sexual immorality. All other sins a person commits are outside the body, but whoever sins sexually sins against their own body. 1 John 2:16. For everything in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life comes not from the Father, but from the world. You should silence that bad boy. Quiet. Mark 7:20-23. And then he added, it is what comes from inside that defiles you. For from within, out of a person's heart, come evil thoughts, sexual immorality, theft, murder, adultery, greed, wickedness, deceit, lustful desires, envy, slander, pride, and foolishness. All these vile things come from within. They are what defile you. So thoughts about such verses, Darren.
Well, the topic is lust, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so what's the definition of lust? I'll ask you first.
You're going to ask me?
Yes.
Well, dang.
You brought up the topic.
Yes. Ooh, there's some consequences of lust versus you. Anyway, so I had learned that lust is basically anything sexual that you feel for someone that is not your spouse. So if you're not married, or if you're married but you're thinking about somebody else, is what I had learned.
Okay, so if we unpack the word lust, okay, lust is this like strong, like all-encompassing desire. It's basically you have to have a thing. You can lust for gold, lust for sex, lust for Pokemon. I don't know, but
catch them all.
That wasn't scripted. Anyway, it's like ask a Marine what makes the ground green. What makes the grass green. Anyway, blood. Yeah. Try that with your fiance. Just yell at him really loudly. What makes the grass green? And see what he says.
Interesting.
He might. It's conditioning. Anywho, off topic. So lust is an all-consuming, all-encompassing desire for something. It's not a normal, like, I don't lust for money if I want to make some so I have enough money to survive. If I'm making, if I want to get paid enough wages so that I can have a nice house and a car and eat enough food, that's not necessarily a lust for money. It's the wanting to have more money just to have more money. That's a lust for money. Lust for sex means that, you basically throw aside all other considerations. It's like, she's married, I don't care, kind of a thing. So, again, you have to unpack what is what. Language is important.
What about sexual immorality? So again, I feel like that's kind of the same thing.
Well,
just from what I learned as a wee one.
Well, the thing is, we can take the way certain things have been interpreted in the Bible and unpack them. For instance, for a lot of people, sexual immorality would mean like homosexuality, for example. But
The darn alphabet mafia that I'm a part of.
LGBTQA plus plus plus. Yeah.
Alphabet mafia.
The simple fact is, however, that it's a little bit more nuanced than that, because one of the words that gets, translated for meaning homosexuals actually was a word for those that practice sex with temple prostitutes. The temple prostitutes typically were children that had been abducted from their parents and forced into sexual slavery. Not really a prostitute, though, either. They were used for basically the worship of different fertility goddesses and gods and everything.
Yeah.
So it was actually more of a translation of pedophilia, not homosexuality.
Because it was not until 1946 that homosexuality got added to the Bible.
Very good. Yes,
And the people who were
right.
And the people who were translating it, there were a couple that sent them these big long things. They're like, this is why you shouldn't term it this way. Like, if you have to use homosexuality, use like predatory homosexuality, or like something that implies that it's this really harmful thing where you're going after someone, not like just regular old homosexuality.
In fact, a lot of the people that basically told them not to do it that really were biblical scholars.
Yeah.
Actually.
There were people who knew what they were
talking
about.
People who understood the languages involved. They understood Hebrew. They understood Aramaic. They understood... In fact, actually, fun thing, a lot of people say that, well, homosexuality is addressed in the Old Testament, talking about these verses, in particular, but it's not addressed in the New Testament.
Well, actually, it is.
Yeah, she's kind of skipping to the punchline. It is. Your dog is whining.
Maybe.
Anyway,
excuse me.
I'm all alone. So, the verses that may actually be Jesus addressing homosexuals.
Oh, geez. Crank, ugly, muggly.
The word that it's translated as is eunuch. But there's several different phrases that are translated as the word eunuch. So there's the eunuchs made eunuchs by man. There's eunuchs by, by at birth. Yeah. The thing is, the phrase that's being used in Aramaic is essentially those that aren't attracted to women, which most likely was a euphemism for homosexuals. In fact, Judaism is fairly accepting of homosexuals. In fact, even the country of Israel is fairly accepting of homosexual, from what I kind of recall in studies. The thing is, that particular sin, it didn't seem to bother Jesus. He just mentions them and then moves on. So instead of getting all upset and going, and these eunuchs should not be allowed to be eunuchs. No, didn't do any of that. Okay. The dog wants into the movie.
Yes.
So yeah. So the whole concept of sexual immorality,
well,
it can get unpacked. There's certain things that are, definitely sexually immoral, like raping someone, which we touched on last time, or anything of that kind of sort. And yeah, I would say that those things that we know are unequivocally wrong, rape, adultery, yada yada yada, they are bad things, I'm
going to interrupt, sorry, because it was more in the New Testament where there's like 3 other instances where they talk about homosexuality besides Jesus, because 1 Corinthians 6, 9 through 10, 1 Timothy 1:10, and Romans 1:26 to 27. But I have a feel that most of those, again, were the whole cultic practices and the temple boys and all that jazz.
Yeah, a lot of that.
But I just had to argue that it is mentioned in the New Testament.
Right, but
not
when I'm talking about mentioned in the New Testament, I'm talking more about mentioned by Jesus specifically in red text.
Okay.
Jesus didn't talk about homosexuality. Well, he did, kind of, maybe, potentially. He might have mentioned it in passing and then moved on, which would indicate that it wasn't really like a key tenet of what he was trying to teach everyone about, loving your neighbor and salvation and grace and forgiveness and all of the stuff that, he was really focused on. Jeez. But, yeah, so just a little bit of disclosure here. I was a missionary with the ELCA, the Evangelical Lutheran Church of America. Don't consider that evangelical as like right-wing Christian evangelical. When I was working for them, when I was a missionary, they had just accepted homosexuals. In fact, they had a huge schism with the Missouri Synod because they were going to accept homosexuals. Missouri Synod said, heck no. And ELCA said, why not? So there's a giant schism between those two Lutheran churches over that topic. And it does garner really, really big problems. It does cause huge chasms between Christians on homosexuality and everything. It seems to be a much bigger issue, and probably because it's made to be a much bigger issue by people who are against it. Again, it's a huge focus, but it didn't seem to be like a giant focus of Jesus' ministry. Hence why people say he never even talked about it, and the one time where he might have actually been talking about it, he might have just mentioned it in passing as if it really didn't bother him. But in regards to sexual immorality and things like that, don't do it. If it's immoral, it's immoral.
So where do you think the teaching comes from where, like I said, what I had learned of, like, if it's not with your spouse, then it's wrong. So basically you're like, until you're married, like, and that's the thing I think about too, like in that day, like you'd hit puberty and get married. So it wasn't like a big deal, but like nowadays you might not get married at all. So you're just supposed to be like celibate and like not even think it, like.
So
seems a bit tricky.
Keep in mind the environment of the time. So, if you look at a woman lustfully, you are, odds are, looking at someone else's wife. If she's not your wife, she's probably someone else's wife, because again, as Kira said, they did marry the women off at a very young age. In fact, I have a hard time calling them women, really, because, I mean, they were young girls. They... so cute. They did have... He was fine. They did have the whole adultery thing on their side in this respect then. Because if you are looking at another man's wife, that could be considered also coveting. another man's wife.
Well, because women were seen as property back then.
Right.
So that's, I wonder just how much of it is tied in culture.
A lot of it.
Yes.
A lot of it is tied with the culture. Especially in like Corinthians and so on. So we have a couple of different narrators in the Bible, in the New Testament specifically. Actually, we have a few. So we have the writings of Paul. Yes. Oh yes, the majority of your New Testament is Paul.
Yeah.
Paul was originally a Pharisee who had more than likely served in the Roman legion, because he was a Roman citizen, but he was a Jew. There was really one way of getting to that position, of being a Jew who had Roman citizenship, and that was being an ancillary legionnaire. When he was hunting down Christians, there's really good reason to think that he wasn't just like going there and saying, "I accuse you of heresy," and then having someone else do it. No, he was probably going there and killing them himself. He probably had a lot of blood on his hands before the road to Damascus. And he was doing it at the behest of the Pharisees, which were the religious right of the time. Always comes back to that, doesn't it? But yes, he had his own positions based on his own understanding and study in the Bible. He was literate. He was well studied. He was a religious right and Pharisee, and he had a very militaristic background, potentially. That's the one theory, anyway. It happens to be one theory that I believe, but okay. That's why I'm mentioning it. So, he's one of the narrators, but we also have the different accounts of Jesus' ministry. And we have a few different narrators of that. Then we have John, who wrote a few books, and we have Peter, who wrote a few books. And they do have different positions on things. They do have different opinions. And the opinions bleed into the books heavily. You can't read the writings of Peter the same way that you read the writings of Paul. And you can't read the Gospels the same way you read the letters. So, it's unfortunate that we don't have the letters to Paul. Or at least they aren't in the Bible, because that would have been fascinating. But they could have been things like there's a lot of discord that's being sowed because, all of this stuff, and then Paul writes, well, don't do any of that, If it's causing problems, then don't do it, turn away from pleasures of the flesh and blah, 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 all of that. So, we don't know what was written to Paul, or if anything. Paul could have had a one-sided conversation too, because, he was in prison most of the times that he was writing these letters. And you don't have much to do in prison except write, I guess. So, yeah. So, again, I think Paul has a sizable contribution to the concepts of what is sexual immorality. And of course, a lot of that comes from the way that he was brought up in the church. I'm not saying that he's bad. I'm not saying that, it's bad. I'm just saying that I would tend to side on grace. In most things, I default to grace. If you're forgiven, you're forgiven.
I like that. I agree.
Good.
Fun.
Yay.
I'm
No.
really tired. What?
Now, do we want to touch on Palestine, since we already said that we didn't touch on the sexuality stuff last time?
We're at 20. We will do it next time. I know you're very eager.
Ooh,
but
because
we're at 20 minutes, and I am very sleepy.
Yeah. That is a topic that will most likely, if anyone that sees the video sees me in the wild, will probably throw eggs at me.
Interesting. Apparently, I don't know, it's really warm out. Like, they would maybe cook, and then you'd have a meal. And be like, oh no, the eggs. And we're like, oh, they're cooked. Like, thank you for free food. Gross.
I don't think they would cook at
myself
97
out.
degrees. I don't think so. I don't think they would cook at that temperature.
I don't know.
Although sidewalks get a lot hotter in that kind of temperature. So.
That's true. Yeah. We need a clean sidewalk. Anyway, we're done. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe. Please don't send us hate mail. Okay, bye.
Send me hate